countdown to the vote that will decide Scotland's future, what big questions still need answers, and do the politicians have them? Hello and welcome to Inverness for the big debate, Choosing Scotland's Future. In exactly 1 year and 1 hour from now, the polls will close in Scotland's independence referendum. So tonight we brought together a panel of top politicians to tackle some of the big questions that our audience here at Culloden Academy most want answered. So let's meet those on our panel tonight. They are Annabel Goldie, former leader of the Scottish Conservative Party; John Swinney from the Scottish National Party, he's Cabinet Secretary for Finance; Willie Rennie, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats; and the co-convener of the Scottish Greens, Patrick Harvie. So let's go straight to our first question. It comes from Joanna Taylor. Joanna.
How would my potential grandchildren and great-grandchildren wish me to vote, and why?
John Swinney.
I think your family should vote yes, and they should vote yes because this whole opportunity that unfolds for Scotland is essentially about the future of our country. And there are very few opportunities that people have to design the nature and the character of the country that we live in. And this is our opportunity in Scotland, and we have that opportunity in 12 months' time to essentially tackle some of the injustices that exist in our society today. We live in the fourth most unequal country in the world, in the United Kingdom, and amidst the wealth that we enjoy as a country, Scotland would be the 8th richest country in the world. I think we should put that wealth to work to create a much fairer and a much more just society that can create the best possible future for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren.
Willie Rennie.
The United Kingdom has been good for Scotland, it's been good for us, and I think we should stay within the United Kingdom, and I think that's what your grandchildren would want too, Joanna. I think what the United Kingdom has brought for us is a national health service. A country that's so caring that it brings us the National Health Service is something I want to remain part of. A country that's so strong economically that it can bail out the banks in a time of crisis is a country I want to remain part of. And a country that is so compassionate, it's got the second biggest aid budget in the world, is a country I want to remain part of. And I think your grandchildren would want that too.
OK, I'm going to come to our other panellists in a moment, but I'd be interested to hear some opening thoughts from the audience, perhaps bringing in what you've made of the debate so far as it's developed in the most recent months and the quality of the information and argument you've heard so far. Let's bring in, first of all, the gentleman here on the second row.
I'd just like to pick up on Willie Rennie's point about the National Health Service. Which National Health Service are you talking about? The National Health Service is privatised in England and Wales, which will have an impact on the Scottish funding, or the Scottish National Health Service, which is still doing sterling work. And I've seen my father, 90 years of age, get a superb operation recently to help himself. Which National Health Service are you talking about, Willie?
OK. Worth saying that health is an area already controlled by the Scottish Parliament. Gentleman here.
For something as momentous as this, should not the voting be made compulsory, so afterwards there can be no bleating about we didn't get our own way?
Everybody should have their say. OK, gentleman on the front row here.
Just wondering how we can trust any of the statements from Better Together when you're willing to tell lies about trivial things like the roaming charges in Europe, which next year go out, and then lie about the huge things like the bailout of the banks and how that actually worked, and how Alistair Darling claimed that, oh, Barclays never got a bailout. They got a $545 billion bailout between America and Qatar. So how can we believe what you say?
OK, thank you very much. And the lady in the back row. Yes, you.
I find the argument that we should stay in the United Kingdom because of the bailout and the fact that we need a strong nation to bail the banks out quite unconvincing. Because if you look at Iceland and the way in which they manage, it's a very small country, and they've managed to turn things round. And the fact that we as taxpayers should actually bear the burden of bailing out the banks, frankly, is not very convincing.
Yes. OK, thank you. The original question, Annabel Goldie, was how would grandchildren and great-grandchildren that Joanna Taylor might have want her to vote and why?
I think they'd be saying to you, look, Granny, we want you to keep your head on with all this. We want you to look at the issues as best you can. We want you to recognise we live in a globalised world, which we do, and we want you to weigh up the issues and try and work out what is better for Scotland. I think it's very important to say this is not a debate about, you know, can Scotland be independent or not. Scotland theoretically can be independent. The debate is about which arrangement serves Scotland better, the partnership of the United Kingdom or going it alone and being independent. And from my perspective, particularly in a globalised world, I think that the partnership, like any good partnership, helps to pool resource, helps to maximise influence on that global stage. And yes, it does help to spread the burden of risk. And if I can just say to the lady who asked the question about bailing out the banks, you know, either the taxpayer bailed out the banks or we would have had no banks, the banks would have gone under, and that would have left the United Kingdom and Scotland in an appalling position. So it was good that we had, with the United Kingdom, a scale of economy that could bail out the banks. We put about 50 billion quid into the banks, and we put a total package of nearly 500 billion forward to ensure banks could continue to operate and do what we need them to do. And that's not some abstract, you know, apology for banks. We, as people, whether we're borrowing to buy houses, whether we're in businesses and need loans to make these businesses function, to keep our workforce employed, we need the banks.
But you're saying an independent Scotland couldn't have done that?
I'm saying that if you look at the magnitude of the figures, Glenn, a total package of £500 billion and 50 billion of that for two Scottish banks, basically, to bail them out, I just think it would be extremely difficult for independent Scotland to cope with that.
But how can you say in the same breath that it's not about whether or not Scotland can be independent when you're clearly arguing that with the banks we currently have, we might not be able to afford to bail them out?
Well, what I'm saying is it's the balancing of the two options, separation and independence or the framework of partnership. And my point is, within the partnership, we were able to take action. I question if, with independence, we could have taken that action.
OK, so could we afford to be independent or not?
I think theoretically you could be independent, Glenn. I'm not denying that. The issue is, what's the better arrangement for Scotland? I have no hesitation in saying the partnership is the better arrangement.
I think part of Annabel's problem is that the UK bailed out the banks in order to let them carry on getting back to business as usual, and it was business as usual. The UK is now printing money not to invest in the things that our country needs, but to fuel more speculative investment and so on. We're getting back on the same treadmill. An independent Scottish government could be using the same kind of techniques like quantitative easing, but to invest in the things that Scotland needs. Now, I think if you're asking this question of yourself with the long term in mind, I think that's fantastic. And I think it's one of the reasons why some people are taking their time to make a decision about this and not feeling they have to be rushed into it. That's absolutely fine. In the Green Party, very often we ask people to think about the long term when we vote. The ecological challenges of climate change, of moving away from fossil fuels that are going to be defining issues for your grandchildren's lives. The need to have an economic and a social model that does close the gap between rich and poor and doesn't allow the wealthiest people who've been benefiting from the current economic model to hive off all their wealth in tax havens. If we can do something about that, I don't see how we can do it by voting no. I only think we can do something about that in Scotland by voting yes. And I fear that if we vote no next year, it won't be until your grandchildren are your age, it'll be another 10 years or so before we look south of the border and think, what's left of the welfare state? There'll be nothing left to save by that point. I think we need to take action now.
The Greens would have let the banks fail, would they?
if the bank bailout or the subsequent quantitative easing was necessary, you have to have strings attached. You have to make sure that that money, that investment, is going to where it's needed. Look at some of the things that RBS is doing on a vastly bigger scale than the Green Investment Bank.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in our audience again. There's lots of hands up, and I'm interested in what you make of the information and the arguments that you've been hearing in recent months. The lady right in the middle here.
I am going to vote yes, but I do feel that the parties who are on the side of yes and independence have missed a trick, because the economic argument is not being put forward well enough and strongly enough. There is a good economic argument, but it needs to be put forward more forcefully to drown out the voice from Westminster, which is just trying to trash everything. And we haven't had any real facts against the economic argument, but we need the pro-economic argument put much more strongly over the next year.
Well, a poll today... One poll today suggesting that a majority of the public are not yet persuaded of the economic case for independence. A poll earlier in the week suggesting that if the yes side could demonstrate that we'd be £500 a year better off, yes would win, and similarly that if no could demonstrate that we were £500 a year worse off, victory would be theirs. Let me hear from a young lady there. Yes, please.
We've been hearing a lot, especially from the Yes campaign, about why independence is going to be good, especially for Scottish people. But I'm very proud of our contributions, the British contributions to aid and peacekeeping. I'm just not convinced that we'll have such a positive global impact, such a strong voice on what we think is right and wrong on our own. I'm not sure.
OK. And the gentleman 3 rows behind... The gentleman 3 rows behind.
OK, talking about the partnership between Scotland and the wider UK, I believe that Scotland doesn't have to remain inside UK to have a sort of a bilateral trade agreement with the rest of UK. So the argument of partnership, it could actually be done, because I think the way some of the arguments are going is to make people to feel like Scotland is asking for independence, and that will put the two nations against themselves. And I don't think that's actually what is on, but rather that if Scotland is out of UK, it could still have a sort of a financial agreement, either by bilateral trade agreement and partnership with the rest of the United Kingdom. OK,
well, let's put that to our panel, or to Annabel Goldie in particular, because one of the big arguments has been over currency, for instance. John Swinney says we can be independent and keep the pound sterling. Isn't that right? Wouldn't it also be in the interests of the rest of the UK to seek partnerships of that sort with an independent Scotland?
Well, I think we've got to try and consider how the rest of the UK would see itself. Now, whether we accept it or not, the rest of the UK, if Scotland votes for independence, becomes a foreign country. That's what it is. And that's what I find, I find bizarre about the argument from the Yes camp, that the best way to look after our currency is in an independent Scotland to relinquish everything we have at the moment that underpins the pound, that controls the pound, and the argument is go for independence and still have the pound.
But George Osborne hasn't actually said no, has he? He said it's unlikely and he's made it sound doubtful, but he hasn't said no.
What he said, Glenn, is quite rightly, if you consider the rest of the UK as a population of about 60 million plus, I mean, that would all have to be considered, because the rest of the UK is not going to do anything that would imperil the stability of the pound for that population group in that foreign country.
What currency would you like an independent Scotland to have if people decided to go for yes?
Well, I don't want the dilemma to arise. That's, is a dilemma or a nightmare. But I want to keep the pound, and the best way of keeping the pound is remain within the United Kingdom. It's worth pointing out, Glenn, Alex Salmond said in 1999, the pound is a millstone round our necks. We ought to get out it and into the Europe. And he said as recently, I think, as 2009, the pound is sinking like a stone. Now he seems to be the pound's best buddy. So I think you need to question just where the consistency of that approach is.
What John Swinney...
What
would you do if you sat down to negotiate and the UK said, actually, we don't think this is in our best interest, we don't want you to continue using sterling without agreement?
Well, the first thing to say, Glenn, is there is absolutely nothing the United Kingdom can do to stop an independent Scotland using sterling.
But is that what you would do? Just use it anyway?
Well, sterling is a fully tradable currency, so it just... And what Annabel was searching for in her answer was to say that George Osborne essentially came to Scotland to scaremonger about the currency issue, because when he was... Because when... You know, I watched the interviews that you and your colleagues did with George Osborne when he came here to talk about the currency issue, Glenn, and you and your colleagues gave him every opportunity to say there will be no sterling zone proposition that we put forward, and he would not say that.
In fairness, I've made that point, but what I asked you is what you would do if Osborne in the Treasury or whoever it is said no. Would you just use sterling anyway?
Well, you see, the compelling argument here, Glenn, is that it's actually in the interests of the rest of the United Kingdom for an independent Scotland to continue to use sterling, because, and this will bear heavily on the decision-making of the UK government.
OK, but what's the answer, what's the answer to my question about what you would do if the UK
Glenn,
said no?
Allow me to put forward the proposition that I believe in. The position that I... Well, that's just disrespectful, Annabel. And
you're not answering the question.
Well, I'm answering the question. My preference, my priority is to ensure that Scotland retains the pound as part of a sterling zone. That couldn't be clearer. And the reason why the UK will sign up to that is there's £50 billion of trade goes north and south of the border. So George Osborne would have to say to businesses in England, I'm going to put you at a competitive disadvantage by additional costs by stopping Scotland using the pound. And George Osborne won't do that. That's why he's scaremongering.
He's not.
OK, I'm going to let our other two on the panel come in very briefly and then we're going to move on. Willie Rennie.
But John might be right. He might be right. But he cannot guarantee it. It will be a foreign government that's making those decisions. That's the problem that John has got. Because he thinks he wants Scotland to be independent, so he can make decisions here about Scotland's interests. But he thinks that the rest of the UK is going to do what he wants as well. That, if you want the UK, the best way to do it is to stay in the UK.
But you see, the point I'm making, Willie, is that it's in the interests of the rest of the United Kingdom for there to be a continuation of the use of sterling by an independent Scotland. It's in the economic and financial interest.
Can you guarantee that forever? Can you guarantee that forever?
What I'm saying, Willie, is that it's in...
Because it's a foreign government.
Willie, if we start getting down to the level of can we guarantee absolutely every piece of detail, I could ask you, what will be the tax rates in 2016-17? And you would have to say, I can't guarantee you what those will be.
Let me... Let me give Patrick Harvey a chance.
Let's have a mature debate about this, Willie.
OK, let's give Patrick Harvey a chance to come in.
Is to maintain sterling.
If I can get one brief word in, you know, yeah, John's right on one...
You and John Swinney are supposed to be on the same side.
John's right on one level, that life has few guarantees in it. Willie can't guarantee that, you know, Nigel Farage won't win the next election, for goodness sake, at UK level. But I find it inconceivable that any UK government, after spending years saying we're better together, all aspects of our economy work better when we work together, and then immediately do a volte-face and say, and you can't use the pound. What I do think is, in the longer term, it will be in Scotland's interest to have currency independence as well. And I think we should start laying some of the groundwork on that. John and I may disagree about that.
So how long would you seek to retain sterling before introducing a Scotland-only currency?
Well, I'm honestly going to say I don't know. I think it might be a matter of years. It might even be a matter of decades, as it was for Ireland. They gradually moved their currency away. They were only fully independent as a currency for a short time before they joined the euro. It might be a long time, a transitional period. But it does make sense, I think, to do some of that groundwork now. What John and I would agree on, I think, is wouldn't it be nice to have the choice to make that decision in Scotland's interest?
Thank you very much. We could probably do a whole programme on the currency, but let's move on to another topic because there's lots to get through. Our next question comes from Colin Miller. Colin.
I am due to retire in 3 or 4 years' time. I'm currently in a UK occupational pension scheme I have a private pension. What I want to know is what's going to happen to them and my state pension post-independence.
OK, that, I think, probably should go to John Swinney.
Well, the short answer is that all of the pension commitments that you've entered into and which various parties, whether it's the state through the state pension or a company pension scheme through your occupational pension scheme, whatever commitments you have entered into and which those parties have entered into would be absolutely guaranteed under independence. Because once you set up long-term pension arrangements, you have to assure the individuals that have taken on those commitments that you will fulfil those commitments. So an independent Scotland would fulfil its commitments in terms of the state pension as has been promised to you as a taxpayer and as a contributor, and any occupational pension schemes that you've contributed to would be under an obligation to ensure that what you signed up to is what you get as a taxpayer.
Colin. I'll just come right back to you on that. Are you happy with that answer?
Well, I don't think there's, like the previous question, there's any guarantees. And, you know, that's fine for John to say that that will happen until they negotiate with the UK government a settlement. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. Can you sit there and guarantee that I will get the exact same pension under an independent Scottish government than I would from the UK government?
Well, let me address the point on perhaps the affordability of the pension system within Scotland. Scotland currently allocates about 38% of our tax revenues to pay for what's called social protection, the whole of pensions and welfare expenditure. In the UK, it's 42%. So actually, social protection takes up a smaller proportion of the revenues that we generate in Scotland to pay for pensions and welfare issues. So on the question of affordability, I can guarantee, I can assure you that an independent Scotland is financially strong enough to pay the pension commitments that you have entered into. And that's because of the financial strength. The lady up at the back there in the earlier question asked for the Yes campaign to give more details about the economic and financial strength of Scotland, and I'm delighted to do that. For every one of the last 32 years, Scotland has generated more tax revenues per head than the rest of the United Kingdom. We contribute more to the UK in tax revenues than we get back in return. So that allows me, because of the financial strength of Scotland, to be able to assure the gentleman that's asked the question that an independent Scotland would be able to fulfil those commitments in the way that you've entered into those commitments.
Willie Rennie?
Two organisations have questioned what John says and has just said there. The first is the Institute of Chartered Accountants, who have raised serious questions about cross-border pensions that affect Colin. And they have raised serious doubts about those issues. The second organisation is the Scottish Government, because the Scottish Government produced a paper that was authored by John. And John said in that paper that there were serious questions over the affordability of the pension. And the problem was that the demographics in Scotland are much more severe than the demographic situation, the ageing population in the rest of the UK. And that would put huge pressures, combined with the falling revenues from oil. So there'd be significant issues. I actually agree with John's paper in that respect. I just wish he would stick to it.
OK, I will come back to you. I will come back to you, but just in a moment. I want to hear from our audience and from our other panellists also. Patrick Harvey, where are you on all of this? Because we know that the demographics mean that pensions are going to cost more in future, whether we're in an independent Scotland or in the UK as a whole.
I think there's an element of truth in both sides of what we've heard so far. I think there are serious questions to ask about pensions. I don't think, so the questioner in the second row there, I don't think they relate to you. I think it's some of the younger people who are starting their career, starting their working lives and worried about where pensions are going to come from in the longer term. That's a problem for all Western countries at the moment. It's a problem for the UK. And it will be a problem for Scotland. My belief is that we're not going to be able to resolve the questions about high-quality pensions and high-quality care for people as we get older unless we grapple with the issue of wealthy people and wealthy businesses getting out of paying their fair share in taxation. I think unless we're willing to do that, unless we're willing to do that, we will be storing up ever bigger problems for ourselves, whether we're part of the UK or an independent Scotland.
OK, thank you very much indeed. I want to bring in some voices from our audience on this. Gentleman there, yes.
Earlier on, Mr Swinney spoke about a fair and just society. Lunchtime today, his boss said, "I want a nation of wealth and prosperity." Some years ago, he drew £250,000 in salary from Westminster without attending Westminster. How many pensioners here had that privilege?
You can pick up on that when we come back to you. Gentleman, shirt and tie.
Thank you. Mr Swinney looked at the gentleman and gave him a very firm assurance on the future. He looked at me a few years ago and gave me an absolute assurance that Scotland would be better off in the euro.
OK. The lady on the wing, yes.
I know you're saying that you're guaranteeing and that it's the young people of the future that might have something to worry about. What's the difference between being in the UK and being in independent Scotland? What do we have to worry about between both sides?
What do you think?
Personally, I think that either way, the young people are going to suffer, but it's possible that with an independent Scotland, with the wealth that we have, that we might be in a better position. OK,
thank you. And the gentleman here with the moustache.
Yes, I'm a bit concerned with Mr Sweeney's financing of the whole arrangement because it's based, as I see it, on North Sea oil, and the uncertainty is extremely high. Without that, you're talking raising taxes, and I just see a big problem there.
OK, right, let's go back to the panel. I have promised you another go, but I haven't brought in Annabel Goldie. So, Annabel Goldie.
Apart from saying you don't look as though you should be retiring any time soon, let me say that I do disagree with Patrick. I think actually it's people in your position who have a great deal to be concerned about and ought to be asking the questions which you are posing tonight. And I think I would say two things to you. Firstly, that the ability of an independent Scotland to honour pensions and ensure you have the same pension income as you would under the United Kingdom arrangement depends, of course, entirely on the finances of an independent Scotland. It can't depend on anything else. Payment of your state pension will no longer be George Osborne and the Westminster Treasury's responsibility. It will be John and his Scottish Exchequer's responsibility. Now, what I would say to you is that I read today that an independent, politically neutral research unit has said that Scotland could conceivably start the road to independence with a national debt of £150 billion. Now, that to me is an awful lot of money. That suggests to me that an independent Scotland is going to have some very hard, tough decisions to make about what its funding priorities are and where it gets the money from. And going back to the document that John is very coy to speak to you about, it was a document John prepared for his government. It was marked top secret, and having looked at the contents, no giddy wonder it was marked top secret, because it certainly could keep you from your sleep at night. But John was frank in recognising two things: that an independent Scotland's economy is going to be predicated on oil and gas, but John recognised there's great fluctuation in oil price. You never quite know where you're going to be with your receipts. You only have to look at the track record of the oil price to see that for yourselves.
Yes, he said that had to be managed, and he also raised the issue of the affordability of pensions, but he didn't say they couldn't be afforded. In fact, as I understand it, John Swinney has guaranteed to uprate the basic state pension by either 2.5% a year, the price inflation, or the increase in average earnings, whichever is higher. How is he able to make that commitment for independence when the UK government hasn't made that commitment for now?
All I'm saying is that what John indicated in private in his paper is slightly removed from what is being advocated publicly. And I think it's very important to understand that. John recognised that oil, which will underpin the economy, is a declining reserve.
Okay,
One day that
better
oil
let him
will
come
run
back
out.
on some of these points.
So your concerns are legitimate.
I want to talk about this paper because I've listened to a lot of drivel talked about this paper for a long amount of time. The only people that labelled that paper top secret were the Better Together campaign when they released it to the media. That's who labelled it top secret. So when we talk about the quality of debate and the need for impartial information, The Better Together campaign, and Willie has just done it again, has completely misrepresented the contents of that paper, because what Glenn has just said about my remarks in that paper about the affordability of pensions was simply to say that we would have to ensure that we were able to give the guarantees that I've just given to the gentleman there about the affordability of pensions. Why? Firstly, because of the economic strength of Scotland. We pay more into the UK than we get back in return. And secondly, because social protection accounts for a smaller proportion of our tax revenue in Scotland than it does in the rest of the UK. And that's why I can give the guarantee that the state pension would be uprated by the triple lock in a fashion that the rest of the UK parties have been unable to do.
But this business of affordability is a challenge for most Western countries. Was your former policy advisor, Alex Bell, wrong to say that you should spend more time talking about the common challenges that Scotland and other countries face and how you will tackle them, things like pensions? And was he wrong to say that the campaign so far has been predicated too much on old songs and tired policies?
Well, I think that the first thing I would say is that on the whole question of affordability, the financial strength of Scotland is the key point that people have to bear in mind. And, you know, it's interesting to listen to Annabelle's comment earlier on that, of course, Scotland is financially strong enough to be independent. Annabelle and her party have spent the last 20 years telling us the direct opposite of that as they've run down Scotland.
On old songs and tired policies, please.
And I'm all for setting out a positive and inspiring message about what is capable of being achieved in Scotland. The lady over on this side over here made the point that our young people have in front of them the most exciting opportunity to shape the nation, to use the powers that we have to create a prosperous and a just society.
Why does your
and
former policy chief think
better.
You've got the campaign wrong?
I'm here, Alec, to speak, Glenn, to speak on behalf of the Scottish Government, to speak on the positive case for Scottish independence, and that's exactly what I intend to do tonight.
OK, and very briefly on Salmon's salary.
Well, the last time I looked, there's nobody in the House of Commons paid £250,000, so I've no idea how that accusation can be made to the First Minister.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on and try and get to another question and get through the many that we have tonight. It comes from Craig Levy. Craig.
Yeah, the UK Government have announced that they are going to privatise Royal Mail. Now, with large parts of rural Scotland, particularly here in the Highlands and Islands, already facing excessive costs for parcel deliveries, what is the future for postal services in Scotland?
And that again applies whether or not there is a yes vote in next year's referendum. Willie Rennie.
I mean, I think the investment that the UK Government is going to make in the Royal Mail through privatisation will actually allow the organisation to flourish. But what actually the UK Government is doing is guaranteeing the universal service obligation. That's what's being guaranteed.
For how long?
Because it's in legislation, it's been agreed, it is staying, and it means the Royal Mail will be one of the best mail organisations in the world. The difficulty, because under the previous administration, actually the Royal Mail was not allowed to flourish. This will change that. But secondly, it's got the benefit of being a mail service for the whole of the United Kingdom that gives it that critical mass and that strength. Scotland is a far more rural country, and you can imagine the costs of servicing that whole country would be greater and would put that Royal Mail under threat.
OK, Patrick Harvey.
I suspect that there are people in homes all over Scotland, and including in the audience tonight, who can remember Liberal Democrat leaflets coming through their door of a candidate, an MSP or an MP, looking concerned outside their post office, looking concerned outside a Royal Mail station. Liberal Democrats will save the Royal Mail. Liberal Democrats will save your local post office.
But post offices are not being privatised.
I believe that vital public services such as this are best run in public hands. And the Royal Mail is... I deeply regret that the UK government seems determined to inflict this damage on Scotland's Royal Mail before we have the chance to do anything about it by voting yes next year. But I want to make sure that they can't do any more damage to any of the other public services that we rely on up and down the country.
You may have not noticed, but the Liberal Democrats in government have stopped the closure of post offices, and without us in government, that would not have happened.
Okay.
You need to recognise that.
You're flogging the service
Okay,
off.
I want to bring in some members of our audience, right in the middle there. Gentleman with a beard, yeah.
Hello. Willie Rennie's just said that privatising the Royal Mail would be the best thing. How is privatising something that is profitable the best thing for the government? Especially when you've privatised British Telecom, the pharmaceutical side of the NHS, the railways. These things have not brought much back for the UK government once they've been sold.
Okay, the lady next to you.
I have a slightly different question.
Oh, I want to stick with the Royal Mail, so we'll come back to you maybe a bit later in the programme. Gentleman on this side, yes, you.
Frankly, I think whether your view on privatisation is good or bad or not is really irrelevant. What's more relevant is what will happen in independent Scotland. Now, if this goes ahead, which it looks like it will, the SNP are saying they will, renationalise it, but we don't know how much that will cost. This is an awful lot of uncertainty, and quite frankly, we know what we're getting with the United Kingdom. We know what's going to happen with the Post Office now. Let's just stick with our union. We know what we're getting. Let's not go into uncertainty in independent Scotland.
Years and years of right-wing government.
I don't know if that is what you're saying. If Scotland becomes independent and the UK government has privatised the bulk of the Royal Mail, would you renationalise it?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that we're in the middle of a major constitutional debate here in Scotland, and we have a proposal from the UK government that looks to me as if it is being rushed through at an unseemly haste to privatise the Royal Mail. And I think out of respect, the United Kingdom government should call a halt to its proposals until Scotland has determined its position as to whether we want to be an independent country.
They're not going to do
September
that.
Of next year. Well, if there was any respect in the UK government for the constitutional process that we're doing in Scotland, that would not be undertaken, so that we would be in a position to determine, once Scotland votes to become an independent country, exactly how we should take forward that.
So everything should be on hold until the point of independence?
On an issue like this, which affects the practical issue, like the gentleman raised there, about universal service obligations and about postal charges into rural areas of Scotland, it would be respectful of the UK government to establish a moratorium on those proposals to ensure Scotland could have its say on the constitutional
Annabel Goldie
question.
pick up on that very point.
I have no doubt whatsoever John is well-intended in what he says, and he's echoing what Alex Salmond said earlier on, that this should all be put on hold until after the referendum. What I find bizarre about Alex Salmond's position is that on the one hand, he tells you that he's not going to interfere with anything that's royal. You know, the monarchy, we're going to keep it. The Queen is going to be there. He's now pretending an interest in the Royal Mail. If Scotland's independent, you won't have a Royal Mail, you won't have a Royal Navy, you won't have a Royal Air Force. So there is a complete... There is just a complete and utter vacuum at the centre of some of these arguments. And I think it's very important that people see through this. What we're being told to make the pill feel sweeter for the argument of independence actually is purely intended to make you feel slightly less anxious, slightly less uneasy, and slightly more content with the proposition. It doesn't add up, and it doesn't bear scrutiny.
See, that's a terribly interesting argument, but for the people who are dependent on effective Royal Mail services in rural Scotland, that is a meaningless answer to the situation.
Well, I would like... Hang on a second.
What I'm concerned to make sure is that the people of Scotland are able to have the opportunity to determine properly and fully how their postal services should be determined. The point that Patrick made a second ago, it would be nice to have a choice, rather to have this railroaded through by a UK government that doesn't speak for the people of Scotland.
Hang on a minute. No, hang on a minute. Hang on just a second. I want to come back to you. I don't want you to come in now. I don't want you to come in. I want to come back to you on what would happen in the event of independence, assuming that the UK government goes ahead with the privatisation of the Royal Mail. Would that private company continue to operate in the same terms across all of the UK, or would you seek to renationalise the Royal Mail in Scotland?
Well, what we don't know at this stage, Glenn, is what will be the shape and the format of the Royal Mail company once it is privatised, if it is privatised in advance.
Would it be your instinct to renationalise?
You do know it won't be the Royal Mail.
Just let him answer.
But what and the other thing we don't know is that once all the cherry picking is undertaken by other private companies of the lucrative parts of the existing Royal Mail business, will there be a profitable business left to deliver the postal services sustainably in the rural areas of Scotland in which we are currently sitting?
Given that you prefer postal services to be within the public sector...
My instinct on this is to retain postal services within the public sector.
But would you renationalise?
Well, my instinct is to retain them within the public sector.
But if they are out of the public sector, do you leave them there or do you bring them back in?
What I don't know at this stage, Glenn, which is why it's impossible to give a definitive answer to you about what condition the service would be in, is exactly what shape it would be in as a consequence of privatisation. But my clear instinct is to retain postal services within the public sector.
Let me bring in the audience again. Gentleman on the front row with the shirt and tie.
Yes, I thought it would have made more sense, regardless of which type of government we have after the referendum, for the current government to guarantee a universal service from all carrier providers and mail service providers for the whole of the UK, instead of letting, as John Swinney said, the sell-off go ahead and cherry-pick the good bits, which is what's happening now. You go to the big cities in the south, you can get a service. You ask anybody to deliver north of Edinburgh and you'd get told to get lost.
OK. Let me hear from the lady in purple with the glasses. Yes.
The same thing's going to happen with the Royal Mail as happened with broadband, in that we're meant to have 95% coverage, but we've only got 84% coverage because it's cheaper to pay the fine than it is to provide the service.
OK, and the lady on this side?
I'd just kind of like to make the point that, you know, as well-meaning as it is to look at pensions or the price of a postage stamp, I think this really transcends economics or ideology. This is about something that is far more important than the price of a postage stamp. So I'd just really like to ask everybody to think about that when they're considering the economic arguments, that it's about something bigger, I think, in the longer term.
OK, thank you very much. I'd like to go back to the questioner, to Craig, because I think Craig actually used to work for the Royal Mail at one point. What's your perspective, Craig?
My feeling's the same as John's, that it should remain a public service. Having spent a number of years there, I've seen the public service that it has become.
And what do you think will happen with privatisation? Because we've heard a guarantee tonight in law that the obligation to deliver a public service 6 days a week, same price, wherever you post to wherever you're posting across the UK, will be maintained. Don't you buy that?
I'm a bit concerned, I think, as was said earlier, that the companies that do come in and pick off the more profitable parts of the business will not focus in delivering an acceptable service to rural Scotland. I'm already seeing a number of internet-based companies charging really ridiculous prices, classing Inverness as an offshore environment and expecting us to pay ridiculous charges for their services. And I get worried that companies are just going to do the same.
Thank you very much. It's obviously a topic that people do feel strongly about. I'm going to move on, though, to squeeze in another. It is from Mark Mayer, who is a member of our audience. Mark.
What, if anything, would change if the referendum returns a no vote?
Annabel Goldie.
Well, I certainly want to see this question settled. I hope the one thing that changes if there's a no vote is that this issue is put to bed. I think Scotland wants us to concentrate on the issues that are really right at the heart of what we're concerned about, the opportunities for our young people, the state of our economy, whether our economy is growing, can we create jobs, can business expand? All of these things are vital, and yet we just feel at the moment the eye is off the ball because this massive debate is taking place, and it has to take place.
But you're a member of the panel that designed the new powers that are coming to the Scottish Parliament, including new tax powers, however the vote goes next year. Your successor as party leader at one point said for the Tories that was a line in the sand. She now says she wants to look at further powers for Holyrood. How far would you go?
Well, it's not a question how far I would go. The question is what lies ahead after a no vote. I've described the first thing I hope lies ahead, which is a constitutional issue is put to bed. That, incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, will only happen if the result is decisive. And it's really vital that whatever the result is, I think it's conclusive and authoritative. So people have to get out there and vote. But the second thing is, three of the parties who believe in the United Kingdom, that's the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats, have all created their own vehicles for looking at devolution. The Labour Party has got a commission sitting, which is coming forward with proposals. My own party has got a commission sitting, looking at devolution. The Liberal Democrats are far ahead with their proposals. So I think there is a signpost that things are not static, that a vote next year, a no vote, is not a vote for no change.
OK. Patrick Harvey, is that how you see it?
This can be a very polarising debate. It can sometimes be a very hostile debate. And whatever result comes out next year, whatever decision the Scottish people make, I think all of us in politics and beyond need to try and deal with that result in a spirit of constructiveness and goodwill, and if we can manage it, friendship. And we can sometimes manage that spirit in our political life, believe it or not.
Do you think a bit of damage might be done along the way as the two sides slug it out?
I think everybody's going to have to do their best to look within themselves and find that in their heart to accept whatever result the people decide to make. But I do worry that if there is a no vote, one thing that will change is that it won't be the Scottish Tories or the Scottish Labour Party or the Scottish Liberal Democrats that make a decision about some other level of devolution. It'll be UK politicians who are at that point going to be more concerned about a possible referendum on Europe. I think that the rest of the UK's political leaders, media pundits and very many of the electorates south of the border will say with a single voice, can we not shut up about Scotland already? You've had your Parliament, you've had your Calman Bill, you've had your referendum, you voted no, put up with it now, we're talking about something else.
OK.
And I think we'll have missed our chance.
All right. Well, let's go to the audience. There is a gentleman there with the check top and then the lady a few rows behind in the middle.
I think quite rightly we're being asked to get more detail from the Yes campaign as to what independence looks like. And all we've got from Annabel Goldie's answer is that there is going to be some kind of tripartite commitment to some kind of change, maybe sometime in the future. If we have to make a choice, and a clear choice that you're asking for, and I thoroughly agree with you on that, why can't we have the same level of detail of what will change in the event of a no vote as we're expecting from the Yes campaign as to what independence looks like?
I'm a very new Scot. I've only lived here 3.5 years, and I support independence for Scotland. And what I don't understand about those who object to independence is how is pointing challenges for Scotland an argument against independence? Every country faces challenges. Everybody faces challenges all the time. God knows the UK does too. How are challenges a problem?
What do you think will happen if the result is no? What do you think will happen if the result of the referendum is no to independence?
I don't know. I don't like to think that. But I don't... If things are not looking good for Scotland now, I don't see that they're going to get any better after no.
OK, thank you. Gentlemen, a few along from you with the glasses. Just wait a second. We'll get a microphone to you. And then perhaps the lady behind you.
I have a learning disability. I'm concerned about the changes to benefits for people with disabilities.
OK, well, we're going to stay focused because we're running a bit short of time on this issue at the moment, but thanks for raising that concern. The lady behind.
I don't see any difference whatsoever in the problems that will affect a Scotland that is either in a union with the UK or separate from the UK. They all are the same problems, but in Scotland we would have the chance to actually work at these problems ourselves. In the UK, we won't.
Okay, one more thought from the audience, and then I'll go back to our panellists. The gentleman in the white shirt, yes.
Surely a vote for no to the referendum is a vote for no change.
Well, Annabel Goldie indicated that it may not be, that it's a signpost to other things. Willie Rennie, some people in the audience doubt the commitment of the three big parties who are together in the Better Together campaign. Can you offer any reassurance?
I think Patrick was right in one respect, which was that we do all need to come together after the referendum, because I believe... After
the referendum? What about, the blueprint that somebody was looking for before the referendum?
Let me tell you, because I actually think it's important that all the parties embrace change after the referendum. But before the referendum, we have set out very, very clearly that we want home rule for Scotland within the United Kingdom, a federal UK. That's our ambition, because we think that's a sustainable way of running the United Kingdom. That would mean that we would get more tax power for Scotland. We could raise more of the money that we spend, the majority of the money. Hold on a second. And the second thing that we're trying to do is to make the Scottish Parliament a permanent institution. Because actually, just now, it's a temporary institution. Westminster could wipe it out at any moment. That needs to change. It needs to be made a permanent institution. Now, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are making progress with their commissions. They've got significant progress yet to make. But what I want to see is a commitment before the referendum from all the parties, all the people who are against going it alone, against independence, committing to more powers, because we think that's a sustainable way forward.
Does that mean, Willie Rennie, that you will sit down with the Conservatives and the Labour Party, you're the Liberal Democrats, you'll sit down with them and hammer out an agreed deal, or will you all have different offers, or what?
I think there's an emerging consensus. I think think tanks are looking at similar powers to what we are proposing, Devo More, Devo Plus. There's an emerging consensus. The Labour Party talked about more income tax and other taxes as well. They are making significant progress on this. I do want to see an agreement, Glenn, from all the parties in advance, declaring that we will do more after the referendum.
Labour can't even decide what it thinks about the bedroom tax, let alone the rest of the welfare system.
John Swinney.
I agree entirely with what Patrick has said, that the UK parties have had an opportunity. They took an opportunity in the Parliament where we were a minority government to form the Calman Commission, to look at all the powers that they thought should be added to the devolved Scottish Parliament. And we ended up with a situation which gave us very limited additional responsibilities and took our ability to control the revenues that we raised in Scotland from 7% to 15%. And it doesn't give us the economic levers to create the opportunities to create a dynamic country. They had their opportunity just in the last couple of years to decide what additional powers we could have, and that was the minimal additional powers they gave us. Now, if we need a clue as to how this will be handled, let's go back to 1979. I'm old enough to remember that. A couple of days before the referendum, one of the most distinguished Scots, Lord Hume, a Conservative, went on television and said, vote no in the referendum, and the Conservative government that's coming will give you more powers in a better Scottish Parliament. What happened? We got 18 years of Tory government and absolutely no self-government. So we cannot afford as a country to make the same mistake twice.
Annabel Goldie.
Well, in 2010, a Conservative Prime Minister promised to give Scotland extra powers, and 2 years later he did. Now, can I go back to the original question from the gentleman?
Briefly, please.
I actually think that when people make their decision, they're not being swayed so much by, is it a question between independence and getting a slightly more beefed up Scottish Parliament. I actually think the issues, and it goes back to what a lady said from over there, are much more fundamental. Because nobody's talked about sentiment here. And I find repeatedly throughout Scotland there are two distinct groups of sentiment. One group is, I'm Scottish, I'm proud of it, I'm delighted to be here, I want Scotland to succeed, and I'm totally at ease with being British as well.
Okay.
That's the first sentiment. The second sentiment is that people say, do you know what, I like the comfort of the partnership, I like what that offers, I like what it brings, and I like the ability to spread the risk and share the burden of risk if challenges are down.
Right.
And I think a lot of people have a gut instinct that they find comfort in that, and it's from that panoply of events. And that, I think, is the emotion that's actually going to drive next year.
OK, thanks very much, Neil. I'm going to get a few final thoughts from people in the audience who haven't spoken. This will be your last opportunity, and then I'll come back to the panel for a final question. So, gentlemen on the front row here with the tie, first of all.
I find a lot of the SNP's rhetoric is based on sort of false hopes, what might happen. They're looking to jump out of a relationship with the rest of the UK, yet 95% of the legislation comes out of Europe. So what they're going to dump the UK, they're going to be controlled from Brussels.
OK. Gentlemen on this side, shirt and tie, just a little bit in front. Yes, you, sir.
What I would like to see is a lot of people are undecided like me that I speak to. And Scotland is a vibrant, ambitious, smart, intelligent country. We are about to become the European capital for renewable energies. And I think what we want to hear is the positives on both sides till we can make a balanced judgment. And so far, all we're hearing is positives from one side and negatives from the other. I consider myself Scottish, I'm a proud Scot, and I also consider myself British. And after the referendum debate and the election, I'll still consider myself proud Scottish and proud British. So let's hear the positives for the people like me who are undecided.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm going to go to our final question, and it comes from Patricia Welsh. Patricia.
Hi. It's the elevator question.
What's the elevator question?
You have 30 seconds in a lift to answer this. Why should or shouldn't Scotland be independent? 30 seconds.
The answer might depend on who else is in the lift, I suppose. Let's put that, first of all, to John Swinney.
Scotland should be independent because what it will do is give the people of this country the opportunity to decide for ourselves, just as we have done on education and health and local government and transport under devolution, to create the best solutions for the country on our economy, on international affairs and on making sure we've got a welfare system that we can be proud of as a fair and just system. So for me, independence is about enabling the people of Scotland to decide our future and to create a country that we can be proud of.
Willie Rennie. Willie Rennie.
The United Kingdom, Patricia, has been a very successful union over 300 years, and it can continue to be a successful union. It means we can share risk and reward. It means we've got global clout. It means we've got economic strength. And it means we've got social equity. Those are great values that I think we should enjoy and we should continue to work at. That's what's good about the United Kingdom, and I want to keep it that way.
Patrick Harvey.
Scotland, just like the rest of the world, is facing profound challenges over this coming century. Challenges of inequality, of ecological problems, which we've caused ourselves by the economic model that we've run, the centre-right economic model, which has failed us so badly, and we need to build an alternative to that. I see very little chance that the political culture or institutions of Westminster are going to do that. I think we have to do it for ourselves.
Annabel Goldie. And finally, Annabel Goldie.
Well, I'm going up in this lift. I'm going up because I want to stick with this United Kingdom partnership. I think it has served us well. I think it lets us be Scottish and proud of it. I think we've got a good Scottish Parliament. I think it can be made better. But I think it's important to be part of that family of nations, which is Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It gives us a strength. As Willie says, it gives us an influence. It gives us a clout. I'm proud to be Scottish and British. I want to keep it that way.
OK. Well, now, you've heard the arguments from both sides, and we've run out of time. So it remains only for me to say thank you very much indeed to our panel here in Inverness, to our audience, to you at home for watching. There will be many more debates between now and the 18th of September next year. But from all of us here in Inverness, Have a very good evening. Night.